You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
J.T. Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is World Anvil is a browser-based world-building platform designed for all world builders, writers and novelists, dungeon masters, game developers, and everyone else. World Anvil keeps your world setting safe and organized, helps you find your characters, locations, plots, timelines, and maps quickly and easily as you write. Then, if you choose, you can showcase your amazing world building to the world, beautifully and interactively, to keep your readers engaged. You can even use our professional tier to build your career selling access to behind-the-scenes content your readers will love and growing your community. Build your world setting in any genre with over 25 custom-built world-building templates, complete with prompts to inspire your creativity. Allow your readers to explore the public parts of your world in an innovative new way with interactive maps, timelines, and wiki-style articles. Give special access to co-authors, beta readers, customers, or patrons to see exclusive behind-the-scenes content. There's a free version to get started with all of the major features. Guild membership offers you a host of extra options, including comprehensive privacy settings, co-authors, presentation options, and so much more. Join our community of over 800,000 world builders, including professional authors. Take part in competitions and learn more about world building at this fantastic online community. Use the coupon code HANK to get 20% off all 6 and 12-month subscriptions. WorldAnvil.com. I'm a recent convert and I know you will be too. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Sue Monk-Kidd on the show with me today. She has a new book called The Book of Longings that is one of the most interesting works of historical fiction that I've seen in quite a while, and you'll know what I'm talking about in just a little bit. Welcome to the show, Sue.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you. Sue, we begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
It was when I was very small, probably 6 or 7, listening to my father tell his outlandish stories. He was a great storyteller. Well, he still is. He's alive and well at 98 and still telling stories. But he used to entertain my brothers and myself with tales. And I remember at some point being I thought, what a wonderful thing to do with your life, to enchant people with stories.
Absolutely. What did your father do for a living?
Well, he was a independent insurance agency, so he owned the little insurance agency in my small hometown in Georgia.
Gotcha. But he was just a natural storyteller, huh?
Well, and he was one of them. So I think there's a lot of storytelling on front porches in the South still, believe it or not, but particularly in that generation. And, he handed it down, I guess.
I love that. Sue, were you a bookish kid? Did you read a lot?
I did. We had a library in my little hometown of 3,500 in Georgia, and it was I tell people it was a defunct Presbyterian church that got turned into a library, and it was wonderful, and I spent a lot of time there, most of my summer, in fact, and I was a Nancy Drew girl, and loved. Probably the book that turned me on to reading as a child, really avidly, was Alice's Adventures in Wonderland.
Oh, I love that. That was Alice the first story that just opened your mind to the possibilities of what you could do with story?
I think so. I mean, I look back on it, and I remember exactly where I was, how I felt, what was going on when I read that book. And I can't remember that about any other story I read as a child. I mean, I remember the stories, but not the circumstances. And I was lying in the grass, this mimosa tree. I remember it very well, how the pink little fuzzy blossoms were falling off onto my page, and how I kept one in my pages after that. But it was about the extraordinary journey Alice took down that rabbit hole, and I felt like I went with her. And for me, it was, I guess, the waking of my imagination, and it just had an impact.
I love that. Sue, so many of us, have dreams of becoming writers, of having stories of ours published. But a little thing like life gets in the way a lot of times, and there are families to raise and mortgages to be paid and power bills to be paid. And we find ourselves, pursuing a career in the meantime. What did you pursue career-wise after school?
I studied nursing. I became a registered nurse.
As one does.
Yes, as one does if one graduates in the 60s. You become a teacher, a nurse, a librarian, a secretary, or you stay home and can tomatoes like my mother. This is what I used to say. But, our opportunities had not really expanded. But I wanted to be a writer at the time. I always did. But I didn't have the vision or the courage or the something or really the kind of cultural support you needed for that. And so I became a nurse. And I got a BS degree in nursing at Texas Christian University, and I worked as a nurse through my 20s.
Wow. Did you, was there ever a time where someone of influence in your life, maybe a parent, maybe a teacher, recognized the storytelling gene inside you and offered encouragement, even if it didn't immediately bear fruit? Yes,
that happened for me, and I was very fortunate that it did, because writers, the writer in us that hasn't quite emerged yet, really needs this. We need to hear someone else validate us. And we can do it ourselves only so far sometimes in the beginning. But both of them were teachers for me. One was a professor of English in college who took me aside and said, "What in the world are you doing studying nursing? You're a born writer." And do you know, I didn't change directions after that, because I still had not been able to sort of find my own ground with that. But I never forgot it. And the second one was when I finally did decide to pursue writing. I was 30 years old. It was actually on my 30th birthday. I just said, that's it, I'm going to do this. And I enrolled in a little creative writing class at the local college, kind of an adult education thing. And the teacher told me, she said, a similar thing. She said, you were made to write. And so those things are extremely helpful in our development of confidence in ourselves and our ability to continue, actually.
Absolutely. There's a lot of dark days as a writer, sitting alone at a desk with a computer, with a notebook, whatever. And there are plenty of times for discouragement to come in. But I don't know how many times I have clung to one of those little nuggets of encouragement. So I always encourage people to tell their stories of that. I think it's so important.
Yes, and I clung, is that a word?
I
Clung.
don't know.
As a writer, I should know this,
I know.
but maybe it's clinged to them at the time.
I was thinking Sue studied at Sewanee. I'm sure she'll correct me.
Yeah, no, I need all the help I can get when it comes to that kind of thing.
So your debut novel, The Secret Life of Bees, what an immense debut novel. Was that the first full-length novel that you had written?
It was, and it was a great surprise to me, the whole thing.
I'll bet. Do you remember when that story first came to you, what the first kernel of inspiration for that story was?
Yes, I do. It was based on a memory. I grew up, as I said, in this little town in rural Georgia, and we lived sort of in the country in an older house that had bees that lived in one of the walls. This sounds incredibly eccentric, I know, but that was the case. And my father tried to get rid of these honeybees, and my mother and I, that we would terminate them. They lived there 18 years, seriously lived there 18 years, and they would make honey in the wall. My mother turned this into a guest bedroom because we never had guests, and we closed the door,
Right.
and lived with the bees. So this was an odd part of my childhood. I mean, you would sometimes see an errant bee kind of loose in the house, and we didn't think much of it, but they would actually kind of leak out of the wall, the little cracks in the wall, and fly around. So that was my childhood, and when I started, when the desire to write fiction surfaced in me around the age of my early 40s, I had been writing nonfiction all that time. I thought of this memory, and I got an image in my head almost immediately out of that memory of a girl lying in her bed at night, and bees were coming out of the wall and flying around the room. And that was the genesis of The Secret Life of Bees. From there, I just, sprouted a story.
When that book came out, it was a huge success. It touched so many people connected with that story. It became a movie. When all of that is going on, because when a book comes out and the promotion end of it is going on, for the writer, that story is a distant memory. The creation of that has already happened, and now all of this is, what kind of gets tacked on at the end. Were you writing your follow-up novel in the midst of all of this blow up with The Secret Life of Bees?
Yes. Typically, after I finish a book, I take a good while off from writing just to kind of usher the new book into the world or prepare for the publication of it, and really mainly to have some fallow time creatively. I tend to think that we need to let the ground lie fallow and refertilize or whatever it does. So I did that for about a year, but The Secret Life of Bees really took off when it was when it came out in paperback. And I remember the moment well because it had done quite well in hardback, but it didn't have that runaway success that it was going to have until the first book tour event I did after the paperback to promote it. And I remember going in a bookstore up in Connecticut for the event, and they said, "Well, we've had to move the event across the street." And I thought, "Oh dear, it's, will we be sitting on a park bench or something? I couldn't fathom what the problem was. And they had moved it to a gymnasium, a basketball, because there was such a crowd of people there. And I thought, this is very unusual. What is going on? But from that moment on, it just grew and grew. So it was an unexpected thing, actually, for me, and it took me by surprise. But it was, I was working on a novel. I had just started working on my second novel at that time, and it was, how do I put it? That was a hard one to write in the midst of all of that Secret Life of Bees success, because there were so many expectations then, and it was a lot of pressure. And I did let it get to me for a little while until I wised up.
Well, your novels are so different, and yet still have that same Sioux Kid, heart and voice. But was there ever, the temptation or the pressure to write a follow-up or write a book in the same vein? Because, that first book and your new book, the Book of Longings, couldn't be more different. Is there ever the pressure to kind of stick with past successes in new projects?
I never really seriously considered doing a sequel to The Secret Life of Bees, though I was asked about doing it about 1 million times. And I just felt like I had left that world exactly like I needed it to be, and if I went back, I would probably ruin it. So you're right. My books are quite different from each other, I guess, on the outside. But on the inside, I think there's a lot of similarities in what I'm writing. There's always, it seems like, I'm writing about strong, independent women who are trying to find their way, trying to find themselves. There's often a community of women, or I'm writing about race, but recurring themes in all of this for me that you can recognize, even though the stories themselves are quite different. But I like following my, I'm not going to call it instinct, I'm going to call it this creative voice inside that seems to know where I need to go next. We all have that. If we listen pretty good, we will sort of land on an idea, and it might come through an image like I was describing, or a character, just a moment of someone says something to you and it resonates. And my thing is that if something like that happens to me and you go, oh, that would make a great story, then I play with it consciously and purposely play with it. And I mean play with it very literally, just not in a heavy, serious way, but I think that the imagination loves to play with a subject. And so I do that for a while, and if it kind of takes root, I know I'm onto something. If my fascination grows, I know I'm onto something, because it has to sustain us for a long time. Right. I'm the slowest writer, It takes me 3 and 4 years to write a book. So it has to really fascinate me. So that's sort of how I go about finding that topic and knowing if it's one I need to pursue.
Sue, you grew up in small-town Georgia. I grew up in small-town Mississippi, just a couple states west of you. The topic of Jesus can be a tricky one, especially when you grew up in the South. because our religion is part of our culture in a lot of ways. Tell me about the first idea about wanting to write a new book about Jesus, but that's about Jesus, but maybe not exactly about Jesus.
Correct. It's not really about Jesus, but he's a big character and a big presence.
Sure.
And I get that what you were saying about the South, I'm trying to remember now who described it this way. It was probably someone like Flannery O'Connor who said it was a Jesus-haunted landscape. And in many ways, it is.
That sounds like a Flannery O'Connor quote.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I guess the first time this came to me, this idea to write a story about the fictionalized wife of Jesus, was really almost 15, 16 years ago now. Not in a very compelling way, I admit. It was more of a fleeting thought that hung around a little bit and then left, and that was that. At the time, I was fascinated by it, but I was also wary of going there. I didn't feel really ready to write that story. And I wasn't, I was busy doing other things. There was just a lot of layered reasons why I just didn't latch onto that one, I guess. But it never left. It was interesting and compelling enough for me to tuck it away, I guess, without even realizing it. Because 15 years later, in 2014, as I was sitting in my study reading this article in National Geographic about a fragment of a papyrus in which it was an ancient papyrus and vetted by Harvard and all of this, in which Jesus refers to having a wife. Now, I have to say, it turns out this is one of the most masterful forgeries ever created. But that was irrelevant to me. I didn't know it at the time, but it became relevant to me later. I was so just jolted by this idea, and I recognized it from a long time ago, and it was as if it had been sitting in a waiting room, waiting its turn. And I brought it front and center and really decided to let my imagination play with it. This young woman, her name came to me. I was really hooked. So I decided to pursue it.
What was, when you first started kind of playing with the idea, just letting your imagination run wild, how long was it before the character of Anna came to you?
Well, she literally came to me almost in the moment. I sat in my chair and kind of thought, closed my eyes and thought, now, I'm really excited about this idea of a story about the wife of Jesus. And I closed my eyes, and I could almost feel this excitement in my body. And then I pictured her in my mind, and a name floated up to me, Anna. And this was literally in the first few minutes of the idea. So my imagination was engaged from the very beginning, but I had to kind of sit with it a little while and play with it. But it was it was like like somebody shook me by the shoulders and said, this is your book to write. You were put here to write that book. That was the kind of intensity I had around it.
When you obviously did an immense amount of research for this book, because the way that you paint the landscapes and the culture is immersive for the reader. Do you research along the way as you're writing, or do you do a lot of research in the beginning and then just let all of that information that you collect, in your brain inform the heart of the story as it comes out?
Yes to both. I found that I have to do both ways. This required more research than I had anticipated, but I came to love every moment of it, even though I was delayed writing for 14 months because I was researching every day, reading and taking notes and watching documentaries and just trying to absorb all of this and integrate it in my mind and try to understand how it intersected with my story. So that was a 14-month process. That was pretty rigorous. It was after that I started writing the first word, and I had to continue to look things up. I mean, I would have a scene, and I would wonder, well, did they actually eat that? And what kind of utensils did they have? And, what time of year is it now? Is this the rainy season? And I would have to constantly be looking things up as I went. But the bulk of it really was ahead of time.
Sue, what's the heart of this story? There have been lots of books that conjectured whether this might have happened or whether that happened. That's not the purpose of this book. But using this device of the wife of Jesus, this allows you to tell a different kind of story. What is this kind of story that you're bringing to us?
Well, for one thing, it is a story of these early events seen through the eyes of women and of one particular woman. It's a kind of feminine and feminist take on the events leading up to Jesus' public ministry. It is Anna's story through and through. And I think it is a story of her longings, her desire to write the lost stories of women, to have a voice in the world. She wants a seat at the table. She wants to express the fullness in her, or what she calls the largeness in her. And she's gifted and brilliant and ambitious and daring. I mean, she's a lot of things, which she had to be, I think, in order to be a partner to Jesus. I knew she had to have a lot of magnitude. But the story is her journey, her quest to realize this largeness in herself and to become this force, this voice alongside and even after Jesus. So it's also, I guess, the story of her marriage, too. It's the story of their relationship as well.
When writing the book, the Book of Longings, was there ever a scene that came to you that surprised you as a writer? That in the moment of writing it, this thing comes out and you weren't personally prepared for?
You mean the surprise, huh?
Yes.
That moment when you don't anticipate it. Okay. Well, it always happens, and it should happen, I suppose, if you're not locked in too deeply to a rote or set idea. I do like to know where I'm going, where I'm starting, and where I'm going to end up when I begin. It gives me a certain structure and security and just the parameters that I need. But how I get from A to Z is often liquid and changes a lot. And so I try to be ready for surprises. In fact, I try to invite them, even though I kind of know the plot line that I'm going for. One in the Book of Longings that I was surprised by was that Judas, yes, the Judas, turned out to be Anna's adopted brother. I didn't really foresee that. I was trying to insert him into the story, trying to find how he came into it, when it just popped in my head, well, make him part of the family, Anna's family, and that would give it far more interest and complexity for me to write. So that was one surprise. I'll try to see if I can think of another one. There were numerous ones in the book that are small and large, and there should be for both the writer and the reader.
Absolutely. The Book of Longings is available everywhere now. Sue, what do you hope people take away from this book when they're at the end and they close that back cover? What do you hope they're left with?
I would love it if they closed the book and were compelled to have a conversation with themselves about their own longings, perhaps. What is their passion that's kind of buried down inside that they want to bring forth? What is their genius? What is their largeness? And how can they offer it to themselves and to the world around them? I mean, that was something of what Anna was about, and I think it might inspire people to search themselves and to take their own quest.
Absolutely. The Book of Longings on sale everywhere now. There's links to it in the show notes of this episode. Kindle edition, audiobook, hardcover, any way that you like to enjoy books. Sue, if people are just learning about you and want to dig into all the great stuff that you do, is there a place they can connect with you online?
That's amazing.
Oh, yes. I mean, there is my website, which is SueMonkKid.com, and you can find me on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram at SueMonkKid.
And we'll link those up as well. Sue, this has been so much fun talking. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today.
Well, thanks for having me. I really enjoy it.
Authors, I have a fantastic new service to tell you about. It's called PubSite. PubSite is a service to help you build your very own website, your home on the web, where you can promote your work and give your fans a place to connect with you. PubSite is a website platform that allows every author, regardless of budget, to have a great-looking professional website developed by the book marketing professionals at FSB Associates. PubSite is the new, easy-to-use DIY website builder developed specifically for books and authors. Whether you're an author of one book or 20, or a small publisher, PubSite allows you to build, design, and most importantly, update your website pain-free. No need to be dependent on a designer or webmaster to make a small but costly change to your website. Save the money and do it yourself. PubSite is the best platform for authors because it's a book-centric platform. PubSite was built just for authors and small publishers. Every design, feature, and layout is book-centric. They have customized designs for you to use. It's easy to build. No coding or HTML is necessary to create a stunning, professional-looking website with all the features you want. Get a custom domain name, yourname.com. It's simple to update. You can add all of your books, add a blog and a book tour, sell from any retailer, manage your email list and social media, and even do e-commerce. Build your website with a 14-day free trial, then pay just $19.99 per month, which includes hosting. And we offer packages starting at $499 to set up the website for you. Pub-site.com, the place to help authors find their home on the web.